welcome to another episode of the Hope Akedika Show with your host, Hope. And today is a little different. I have a special guest on the show. I'll be welcoming her, Jessica, and she's here with us today. She is a philosopher, a philanthropist, and I think she's a great chat. And today we're going to get a lot of knowledge from her. And I enjoy our conversation so much, I had to bring it to you guys. I could not be that selfish. But before we go any further, I just want to say Happy International Women's Day. It's not too late to say it. And honestly, this year was actually the first time I really acknowledged International Women's Day and it celebrated myself as a woman. And it felt really great and liberating to be in an environment of women uplifting and encouraging each other. And just being able to say, you know what, you're pretty amazing. Congratulations, whatever it is that you do, whether you're a mother at home, whether you're in the workplace, whether you're studying, whether you're chasing that degree, whether you're a business owner, whatever it is that you do, you're doing amazing and keep going. So I just want to say that it's a beautiful day and we should make the most of it because women fought and protested to be able to celebrate this day. You know, it didn't just come out of the blue because, oh, let's just make women feel special for one day. No, women fought for the right for equality, to be acknowledged and to be, you know, treated equally in a society where we know we can do what men can do in terms of work, in terms of creativity, whatever it is, we have the ability to be great too. So, yeah. Women, celebrate yourselves. I hope you did. And if you didn't, just, you know, have a little thought to yourself and think, you know what, that was my day. I was celebrated. Even if I didn't think about it yesterday, I thought about it today. So, Jess.
Hiya.
You know, I was just talking to you earlier a little bit about Women's Day and how it came about. And we were just talking about how does it make you feel? And I asked you. And, you know, I really did relate with your response because for many years that was very much me.
Yeah, it's really unusual for me to celebrate these types of days. It's not something I've ever partaken in. But I think it's interesting that these days come about on social media now because it really makes you reflect as an individual, what does this mean for me?
Yes.
But it's also good because it makes other people reflect on how they treat the women in their lives. Am I respecting the woman in my life? Am I making the most of her greatness? Is she making the most of her greatness? And I think it's these types of conversations and reflections that's important for us really making the most of who we are and our excellence in the world. So
definitely,
yeah, it's an important thing.
No, it is. And while we're on the topic, we did say, is there such a thing as International Men's Day? And I said, well, men are the original oppressors from what we know from history. Okay, majority of history tells us that, you know, the male have dominated and have been the causes of the oppression. But no, that does not take away from the fact that men do face their own obstacles and their own challenges that they have to struggle as men. And sometimes because men are less inclined to share their emotions like we women do, because you inconvenience a woman, you will know. You know, men as well. But I think when it comes to that personal touch, the emotion and masculinity and manhood is completely different reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you were sharing your experience.
Yeah, well, I grew up with my father being the main parent figure in my life. And I got to see how men do get treated in our society, and sometimes it's not nice to see that. My mum was the one that took the most advantage. So it was actually a flip for me to see that men struggle. They've got a lot of expectations. Sometimes the system is set up against them. So in terms of custody, they will struggle even if they're the parent that's doing the most. They don't get favoured in that area. And I also think because of the history of men taking advantage, women can sometimes use that to their advantage now. And it's about being cautious of that as a woman. That's our responsibility, not only to make sure that we are upstanding citizens ourselves, but that we protect the men in our lives just like we would want them to protect us. And I think it's important to keep that in mind when we behave with people, not to take advantage.
No, definitely. And it's just ironic that today headlines break out about Tiger Woods and his girlfriend split up, and how she's planning on suing him. I believe the figures is 30 million or something like that. And the nature of the breakup was he had alluded to the idea that they were going on holiday together, and she was left at the airport and locked out of the house. And, you know, to her surprise, she was no longer welcome in the household. And she feels entitled to a 30 million reparation for her suffering, essentially. And we spoke about how, well, is she deserving of that money? Well, she's going to sue this man, but has she had kids for this man? Did she make, you know, vows to this man? Was she there on his journey when he was, you know, making a name for himself, when he was, you know, working his way up and becoming who he is today? Or, like she said, they had the verbal agreement. They spoke about these kind of things before in their relationships. And I really like the point that you made on that as well.
Yeah, I think that women can sometimes feel entitled when they're with a man who has a lot of money. And whilst you made brilliant points then, that if the woman stands by your side and they're there to push you when you need it and support you when you're failing and give you that emotional and physical support and making sure that your needs are met and they have your children, should they be entitled to some sort of security and stability in the event of a divorce? Well, yeah, because that's what our society has deemed appropriate, that there should be some sort of pay off there to show respect and to show that the woman has done the right thing by the man. However, if a woman's in a position where she's just stepped into a man's life, and, you know, Tiger Woods had that money well before she ever entered the scene, so I don't know why she would think that she deserves that much money from him.
Girl, I don't know, honestly. I don't even know how long the relationship lasted. We don't have all the facts. We're not going to speak on it for too long. But it was just a very interesting point to make because it tied in very well with what we were saying earlier when it comes to celebrating women, but then acknowledging that men don't have an International Men's Day and the reasons for that, but also the disadvantages for that. But yeah, we'll leave it to the internet to do its thing because I know the internet is going to drag this one, especially if she makes it to court. This is going to be like watching Johnny Depp and all over again. Exactly. So yeah, you know, we'll leave it to the celebrities to do their thing because they wake up and it's just a new thing every day, really, isn't it? But we have some more interesting issues to discuss because, like I said, you are a philosopher, and when we first spoke, that was the one thing that we clicked on straight away. I was like, oh, as a philosophy student, it was one of the best subjects to study. I loved it so much. And I feel like a lot of young people don't really know how important it is, and carrying on, you know, we know the basics, ethics, we know right from wrong and all, but the study of it as well, what went into it with our ancient scholars and all of that. So and obviously you've done this on a deeper level, and soon you're going to be an educator as well. So I really wanted to just pick your brains. So there's a concept such as utilitarianism, right?
That's correct.
And it's more about what the greater good.
Yeah, greater amount of happiness for the most amount of people.
Yeah.
Is essentially.
So essentially it's about, you know, in a case of this one I can never forget. So imagine there's a train track. I'm sure this is like year 11 or A level, you know, the basic case study. So there's a train track now, and you have the option to flip the switch of where the train goes, whether you're going to let the train run in the direction of 5 strangers or somebody you know personally or loved one, or switch the flick to go in that direction, and you deciding whether you're going to save those 5 people, strangers that you don't know, or you're going to choose your loved one. And that's, you know, that's the dilemma, essentially. And the prima facie is, are you going to put your loved one first, what matters to you the most personally, or are you going to choose to save those 5 lives? Because essentially humanity expects us to be selfless and do the greater good. Essentially that would be classed as the greater good, right? That was the conclusion in the argument.
Yes.
So please tell us a bit more.
So that theory or that problem is called the trolley problem, and it was developed by a lady called Philippa Foot. And essentially it's to make you think about your emotional connection to somebody and whether that holds more weight than what's best for humanity. Most people would lean towards saving somebody that they appreciate or love. And it's something that we need to be aware of, that our emotional connection to somebody does sway our morals. We might bend our morals for somebody. We might put their needs above our own sometimes, because emotions are a very strong driver for our decisions. So in this instance, most people, if they thought about it logically, would say that the right thing to do is to save 5 people.
Right.
Essentially, it's because those 5 people will have the biggest impact in the world because there's more of them. But also it's because if you go down the route of utilitarianism, you want to increase the most amount of happiness. So by saving 5 people, you're making sure that 5 people get to live. You're keeping 5 people's worth of happiness in the world. Whereas saving 1 person, you're keeping your happiness and their happiness in the world. So it's a very interesting principle, utilitarianism, and it's not without fault. Although it's something that we do use quite often when we make decisions, whether we recognise it or not, because that's something else that, whilst you might not know what it's called, you still act in the way where you're trying to maximise happiness for people. That's just how we are. There are issues that arise, such as how do we measure happiness? Because the metric isn't something that's objective, it's subjective, which means that each person defines their own happiness and experiences their own happiness. And when we act in the world, we have to assume that we know what's going to make people happy, because it's not logical for us to go up to each person and ask them before we act, what's going to make you most happy? So ultimately what we have to do is we have to go, well, what would make me happy? It's the golden rule in play. How do I want people to treat me? How am I going to treat other people? And what comes off the back of that is that I might act in a way where I think, well, that would make me ecstatic, but you might say, no, Jess, sorry, that didn't make me very happy. So there's that we can't really judge whether we're being moral, because we don't really know if we're making someone happy and if the ultimate end goal is their happiness. And 2, it also means that we are ignoring other elements of morality too. So we're ignoring intention and consequences sometimes if we just focus on happiness. For example, it's not always right to be happy. Sometimes sadness and pain makes you a stronger person. Sometimes it's those times that develop the character of the person. And if we're always aiming to make people happy, we might not actually give them the tools that they need to be moral agents in the world.
Is this where some parents go wrong? And sorry guys, before we carry on, if you're live right now, please get involved in the discussion. It does not change anything. You guys are more than welcome, and we will feedback if you do get involved in the discussion. We'll be happy to touch on your points, any questions you may have, or any points you might want to add. If you disagree, agree. Like I said, you have your own mind, use it, guys. You know, you don't have to agree with everything that's being said here today. Hi Susanna, and you have commented entitlement issues. Unfortunately, a lot of women feel that, referring back to the moment we spoke about earlier, but definitely it also kind of links into what we're talking about right now, what I was just going to touch on about parents. Sorry, just to flick the hair in case we're disturbing the mic. No worries. Parents and how we raise our children. Sometimes we get that wrong, don't we? Because we want to please them so bad, and sometimes we're not teaching them those basic things that they need to know about. Well, you don't always get what you want. You're going to go out there. It's not always going to be yes. It's not always you can have the ice cream. It's not always that the teacher's going to choose your happiness over another student's happiness because, well, they were playing on the swing first before you, so you have to wait your turn. You know, just little things like that. And I want to see how you feel about this statement. Has Gen Z sort of been the generation that sort of missed out on those kind of things? Because there's a sense of entitlement with the whole generation. Essentially, even millennials are accused of it. You know, they're accused of the entitlement. So did it start with the millennials and then it just got really bad with Gen Z, and now we're trying to correct it with the alpha gen? So how would you feel about it?
I think every generation's got their own unique set of problems.
Yeah.
And I think what ends up happening is that if you've got a parent from, and I can't remember the generation before, millennials.
Yeah.
I think it's Generation X.
I wouldn't even know. I just know the three. I just know millennial, Gen, and yeah.
Yeah. What ultimately happens is that parents always try and correct what their parents did to them. So if you've got a parent that overly indulged in their child's needs, the child will grow up and see something wrong with that, because whatever issues they have, they will say, well, it's because my parents gave me everything I needed and I didn't have the resilience I needed to live life. When they grow up and they have their children, they overcorrect. So they go, well, no, life is hard. This is what you've got to learn. This is how you build character. And they go out of their way to make it extra difficult for their child because they're overcorrecting from their parents. And essentially what ends up happening is that we struggle to find a middle ground with our children. We struggle to take the good from other generations and leave the bad because we're so focused on overcorrecting.
Yeah.
And I think as well, a lot of parents, they're doing the best they can. And there's a lot of pressure from the outside world on how to be a parent. And it's about making sure that your child has everything they need whilst working through your own trauma and trying not to carry on that problem and that generational detriment.
Yes.
And it takes somebody to be self-aware to have corrected what their parents did to them before they go on to have children of their own. And unfortunately, it's a hard thing to do when there's so much going on in the world, to constantly work on yourself and be the best person you can be. It's a hard thing.
Definitely. And I really like the topic of what we're talking about before we came on camera, about selfishness and selflessness and how we go about that as a society, what has been imprinted into us, but then again, you know, the human nature and what we're supposed to be like. So touch a little bit on that again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting when you look at what we expect from society in terms of morality. We lean towards expecting people to be altruistic, which is essentially selfless. But the unusual thing is that our evolution doesn't want us to be selfless. Selfish individuals are the individuals that thrive. So when we look at how we've developed this selfless morality, we need to consider that there is components of our evolution that has shaped why we think it's important to be selfless. Now, some of the interesting things that we find is that when we look at evolution, we tend to look at animals to understand ourselves a lot of the time. So when we look at bees, you'll get a bee that will sting a predator and kill themselves to protect the hive. You get dolphins that when a dolphin is injured, the rest of the dolphins will raise the dolphin to the surface so that they can breathe, and they'll do it for hours on end. And I mean, it doesn't make sense, because essentially a bee isn't sitting there thinking, I'm being really moral right now. I'm not doing this because of my ethics, because a bee's not going to have a concept of morality. Well, we can't say for sure, but
yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
No, I understand. Yeah.
So we know that it's a biological mechanism that's driving this behaviour, and it's called reciprocal altruism. And what it means is that when we go through life, there's certain things that we can and can't do for ourselves. And because we're an intelligent species, and because we're social, we understand that the idea of, if I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine. And that's where this comes from. It helps us develop ourselves, and it helps us maximise our well-being and our survival. And whilst it seems selfless, because I'm doing something for you, it's coming from a place of selfishness, because it's ultimately so I can survive. Because I know that if I lend you some money, the likelihood is that you will do the same for me in my time of need. And my survival is predicated on you being helpful. So it's really interesting how our morals, we think that morals are a selfless act. They're altruistic in nature. We do things, we class the highest moral behaviour off the fact that we're selfless. When really, when you boil it down, we're all acting selfishly. even in moments of selflessness.
So can we just encourage selfishness then and take away that negativity from it as a concept and just embrace it? Because at the end of the day, we are a selfish species for survival, for growth, for evolution, and for the advancement of society. But then we can just remove the negative connotations, or we can't do that. We need to keep them there so that the selfishness doesn't get out of control.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it's twofold. I think you should do both. I think you should acknowledge that your behaviours are going to be selfish, because once you recognise that you're going to have to do things that are selfish, you can minimise the impact of the selfishness. So it's about being self-aware. Just because I'm doing something that's selfish doesn't mean that I completely disregard people's feelings, opinions, well-being. It means that if I have to do something selfish, which I do because it's part of my development to want myself to survive, essentially, I need to make sure that I am behaving in a way which is as moral and as ethical as possible.
Okay, let's pause there. Let's have a look at what the comment section is saying. It's a work in progress, but change anyone can do if they just take the first step out of the comfort zone to grow. Okay, so I think we're referring back. I'll try and keep on top of the comments a bit better, just so that we're not losing touch of the conversation. Unless it's a question, then we're happy to divert.
Course.
But sorry, I hope I didn't throw you off track. Do you know where you were at?
Yeah, no problem. So the thing that we need to consider when we're acting selfishly in the world is how to minimise the selfishness. And it's fallacious thinking sometimes to say just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it ought to be that way. So there's a philosopher that talks about the is-ought problem, and what it means is just because we're biologically driven to be selfish doesn't mean we have to be, doesn't mean that that's all there is to us.
Okay.
We are also,
and I'm glad.
Yeah, of course. We're all glad. Yeah, the world would be a very horrible place if...
I mean, okay, this is not me, what's the word, attacking at you. This is just like we're discussing, and this is history. It's happened. Colonialism. It happened from a place of selfishness, right?
Of course.
People discovered a land. They saw gold. They saw diamonds. They saw riches. They saw hardworking people, and they thought, I want a piece of that. Actually, I want all of it. And I'm going to leave them with nothing. See, now, the thing is, I don't mind about discovery. You can't discover something that was never lost. But I don't mind you saying, I like what's going on there. Can I come and get involved? And essentially they did, because there were the traitors who were willing to sell out their own people to make these deals. And my thing is, it just went on for too long. Did the morality not kick in? How did people sleep at night? How were they happy to do that and carry on? And it just makes me wonder, like, when did they realize they were being selfish, or did they care that they were being selfish? I know I'm not expecting you to have the answers for this, but this is just a thought that just came to me right now as you're talking. I'm thinking, wait a damn minute, this all goes back to selfishness, doesn't it?
It does.
And it just makes you think, really. But yeah, no, we don't have to stay on that topic if you don't want to.
That's an interesting topic. And I think it's worth talking about, because there's something called cognitive dissonance, which plays a massive part in people continually doing the wrong thing. And whilst they may know that it's the wrong thing, they ignore the problem. And that's the biggest thing that people need to do in order to fix their behaviour. They need to accept that it's wrong and do something differently. And you're never going to have different results if you don't act differently. So that's a big part. One of the main motivators for people taking advantage, even back then when slavery first happened, was the fact that they saw people from other continents as less than, as barbaric, because they assumed that anybody different to themselves didn't have the capacity for reason and rationality, and they essentially reduced anyone different to the status of an animal, which is how they justified it. This person doesn't even know that what I'm doing is wrong, because they don't even have the capacity.
But how can you not see that when the person is suffering, they're dying, they're bleeding, they're hungry, they're overworked, like they have the same physical human structure as you, and you're getting them to do your labor. You can tell that this person is exhausted. Their mother, their father, they need dignity, they need pride, a sense of pride.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't see that, then like maybe they really genuinely allowed themselves to believe to the extent of delusion,
Yeah.
that they allowed it to carry on for that long. And especially if you're born into that, it will become normal to you, right?
Yeah.
It will be like nothing to you. You won't know any different. You think, yeah, we, you know, these are the people who work for us and they do everything for us, and we are the people who get to enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Yeah.
So
And they would justify it by saying, well, without us, they wouldn't have this stability. They wouldn't have somewhere to live. They wouldn't have food. They wouldn't be able to provide for themselves without us. So we're doing them a favour. That's how it gets framed. And unfortunately, the difficult thing is, even today, I mean, if you follow that train of thought through to modern day, I mean, you can probably see how it's developed now in terms of how we treat animals as well, because it's something that in our society we're born into the idea that factory farming is normal. But when you actually sit there and have that same thought process that you just mentioned about, we can see there's suffering though. We can see the suffering going on. We can see there's exploitation going on. Why are we okay with it? And it's because we go, well, they're not human. And that's the mentality that was applied back then.
yeah, but we can't see it, can we? Because the everyday people, they don't have the access to this. Like, it's educated people who take their time a day to go and, you know, like, this is what's happening. Then you just go down this rabbit hole. You see, maybe there are videos available online, I don't know. But then you see the videos, and then you see the charities fighting, and then you get invested.
Yeah.
But then the rest of society, it's not like it's being taught in school.
No.
If they really cared, I mean, they won't do that, because, you know, it's a customer-based, you know, there's somebody making a profit and the consumers are there, and the ones who are ignorant are the consumers, unfortunately. So how do we combat this? Because I genuinely feel like the way women fought for equality, the way certain people like Martin Luther King fought for freedom, do we have that in our society, in our generation? Because I see the passion, like just what happened in Greece about the train falling off the rail, and people are so angry at the government. They're angry, like, how did they not see the fault? They should have known that this train would have crashed and it should not have been operating, or something was wrong, and they're apologizing because they know that somebody overlooked something, or something went wrong somewhere that could have been prevented. And you see the way they're so passionate about their life, they're so passionate about their people, they're going out on the street, they're protesting. And I'm not saying I'm for violence and it's the only way to resolve things, but it's a completely different reality to sometimes how comfortable we can be. We just see something happen, oh, okay, just another day of a black man being stabbed, another day of a kid going hungry on the street, another day of an animal being slaughtered alive, you know. Obviously you have to be alive to be slaughtered, but another day of an animal being processed like it's nothing. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, like, do we have it in us as a society to combat this?
Yes and no. I think the internet, although it can be condemned by people, I think it's done a great job of spreading awareness and allowing people who wouldn't usually be able to reach out for help to do so. I also think it's helped to spread education about certain things that are going on, and corruption in government and in places of power. On the flip side, I think people aren't equipped with the tools to know how to combat this. They feel that the tide is against them, which essentially it is, because the power is in the hands of the people that are controlling society, and it's not the people that are suffering that control society, but it's those people that want and need the change. And when we look at our education system, that's where everything falls back to. We need to educate children, not just in terms of, you know, how are they going to thrive and survive in a capitalist economy? How are you going to go around and be a consumer? Because that's what school is for. It's go to work, fall in line, spend that money to buy things to line our pockets and continue the cycle. Do the same to your children, and it keeps the people at the top in their place.
But see, the majority are the ones who are the oppressed.
Yeah.
So if there was a sense of retaliation in any way, we could completely overthrow the system, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. But there's just, we don't have, what don't we have?
We don't have the ability to think logically, empathetically, and have self-awareness. Because in order to provide people with these things, these traits, it makes them strong. It makes them have passion. It makes them know exactly...
Passion. That word, I love it. I love it. Such a, like a simple overused word, you know, passion, maybe more associated with sex and other things, but passion in life and passion to fight for something you believe in, now that's something.
Yeah, and that's what we need. And I think people don't have passion because they don't feel equipped. And that's what I find a lot of the time when I'm speaking to people about certain issues. People are so scared of offending that they lose their passion for what's right and wrong. And they lose their passion for truth. And they lose their passion for ultimately going against the grain in order to really make a change. And if we provide people with the tools and show them that it's okay to question, it's okay to have this passion and to fight for things that are important. And it doesn't matter if you offend, because ultimately, you know, people get offended, and that's how we learn. That's how we learn how to be. That's how we learn what's right and wrong. And we need to not be afraid of offending if we want to really make a change in the world.
Definitely, definitely. And I think you're going to be a great educator, by the way.
Thank you.
Do you feel like you have a sense of freedom to be able to incorporate this into the education sector, because you know what you're going into, right?
Yeah.
You know that there's a curriculum, then you know what they want to teach these kids. They want to teach them to be consumers, to be workers, to be, you know, just set them up for a certain life and just carry on things how they are. But do you feel like you have the passion
Definitely
to make a little bit of a difference, like, you know, to maybe whether it's the one-to-ones, whether it's the little, or whether it's your lessons in general, because I don't know, do you have the freedom as a teacher? Do you know this?
There's not a lot of freedom there.
No.
That's something that worried me about going into the industry, because I don't want to feel stifled, and I ultimately want to do the best that I can, and I need to go in an environment where I can thrive and really make a difference. And the education system is very limited in the things that you can and can't do. There's a lot of boxes to tick, and it's not the boxes that I would want to tick. I think the biggest thing is to remember that every single interaction that you have with anybody, whether you're a teacher or whether it's in your day-to-day life, every interaction shapes somebody. And every time you show somebody that there's hope and there's more to life than buying the next pair of shoes, and that we need to consciously develop ourselves as individuals first. And you lead by example. If other people can see that that's what you're doing, and they see that you thrive and that your life is so much better off for doing that, that's the best example that you're going to set. That's how you're going to make the most difference.
Definitely.
So I think just by going in the classroom and showing people that there's other options, there's other ways of living, there's use in being intrigued by life. We don't need to be prescribed, this is who you are, this is what you're going to do, and settle for it. We make our own decisions about what we do with our life.
Definitely.
And I think that's what's important.
I know you're going to be great. I was just picking your brains. I know you're going to be amazing. Like you said, just by example, just by being in that environment, even when it comes down to discipline time, the conversations you're going to be having with these kids one-to-one, so much success is going to come from you alone as a teacher. And I know this with all my heart. And you just made me think of something when you said we have a choice and we don't have to conform to society. And I remember our first conversation, we spoke about, wouldn't you just love to sit under a tree and let an apple fall on your head and discover gravity like Isaac Newton, essentially did? And you know, you posted a picture on Instagram the other day, you were climbing a tree, and I was like, this girl. And I love that. I honestly, these are the things that you do that I'm just like, oh, Jess, you're an incredible human being. Like how I would love to go and climb a tree. That is something I'm going to do now. You just brought out something from my childhood, and I know these are the little quirks of yours, the little things that you're going to do, even in the school that you're going to do, that are going to make kids think, she's crazy, but I like her. They're gonna, you're definitely gonna do that. So
Thank you.
all the best wishes in that, in your in that endeavor, and it's gonna be great.
Thank you.
But comment sections, did I miss anything? No? Okay, guys. We have another 10 minutes, and the conversation can go in any direction now. So while we're here, we can just make the most of it, and keep talking about what we've been talking about. So is there any concept in philosophy that you think that we've not touched on that you'd love to leave out there? We've spoke about right and wrong. We spoke about something extreme, something people don't think about all the time.
I think something quite interesting in terms of a method, because I think it's interesting as well to remember that philosophy as a concept is very different to philosophy in the world when it's acted out. There might be ideas that we know could work or we should act a certain way, but putting that into action is very difficult. And it's important to not be hard on ourselves if we can't always be the best version of ourselves or do right. But I think one of the things that I often think about when I want to bring out the most in people is something called the Socratic method.
Okay.
So the Socratic method is a way of questioning people, and it's about guiding people to understanding something about themselves or about something they believe without telling them the answer.
Okay.
So it's about allowing them to get to the conclusion themselves. So it's a really good method because one, you're guiding them. So it's something where they are supported by you. They're supported by your knowledge, but you're not being overbearing in terms of telling them what they should think. And unfortunately, it's something that I promote in my life, and it's something that I actually am writing my dissertation on.
Okay.
But unfortunately, our society does not like the Socratic method. We push people away from it. So I don't know how your upbringing relates to this and whether you can identify whether this happened in your own upbringing, but when children ask their parents why, the answer is usually because I said so, or because that's just the way things are. We're very quick to shut down why questions, and I think that's really what's missing in terms of promoting that it's okay to ask why, it's okay to be curious. And when we ask why of people now, because of the way that our society is, where it's rude to ask why, if someone's in a position of authority, you accept their answer, and that's it.
Yeah.
And ultimately what that leads to is people either rebel against authority because they feel that it's unjust, but they don't really understand why they're rebelling.
Why they're rebelling, exactly, yeah.
Or they conform because that's what they've been told to do.
And they still don't know why they're doing it.
And they don't know why they're doing it. So both states are states of ignorance, but they feel very different, but they're not. They're coming from the same place. If we start motivating people to ask why, the people who are being asked, well, why can't I do that? They won't get offended. They understand that it's part of curiosity. It's part of developing this person in front of me. And it's important that they feel they can ask why. And if I don't have the answer, it's okay to say I don't know. And I think that's what scares people. It highlights an inadequacy in them, but it doesn't. It's just the way they feel. If I don't have the answer, I'm doing something wrong. And it's about having humility and knowing that saying I don't know is a perfectly good answer. I don't know, let's find out together. And I think if you integrate the Socratic method into the workplace, education, your home life, you open communication, and communication is key for developing people. Definitely. And for understanding yourself. So that's one of the big things that I think if people understood certain methods in philosophy, which again aren't taught because you don't want to teach people to think, you want to teach them
to be followers,
the
to
answer.
be sheep, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you teach people how to think, the world is their oyster. It really is. They can do whatever they want to do.
Definitely.
And
this is the philosophy we promote here. But now I know the term for it. You're going to have to write it down for me though, because I need to hear a word at least 7 times before it ingrains into my brain. But I honestly love it. And I've been saying this from the first episode, guys. I'm encouraging free thinkers. I'm encouraging us to ask questions and challenge authority and challenge new concepts and challenge old concepts. And, just these things. And so we can be able to really move forward as a society. Like you said, there are some things I'm actually scared to ask, and it might it's like, well, Hope, you touch on everything, but trust me, there's some things where I'm like, ooh, I'm not even ready to go there because I genuinely feel like I will offend. And you know, yesterday is a great example. I found myself in an environment where I was with very unique people. I don't know, maybe I didn't read the flyer properly, but you know, there was so many different people. I've never seen people wear makeup in that way and express themselves in the way that they did with their clothes, and it was amazing. And I just wanted to ask, why do you do that, or why do you wear? I mean, it's great, but can you I know this is your form of expression, but what was the inspiration behind it? How did it come about? And I want to engage in those conversations, but society has taught me, don't ask, it's rude. And yes, sometimes it's true, because it could be a very ignorant question, like, oh, how is your hair so long and so big? And someone can get offended, very true. But you know, if it's genuinely coming from a genuine place, and you genuinely want to know something about someone because you want to educate yourselves and better yourself, so you can understand, you know, people around you and your society even better, then definitely, why not? You know, we should be asking these questions. And thank you for that tip as a mother. I will learn the patience of, I don't know, Gandhi. And you know, why will always be seen as a beautiful thing from now on in my household. Okay, but
you're allowed to be frustrated, I understand.
Yeah, no, definitely. But when it comes to why, I would never be frustrated. Not after this moment. I'm trying to raise a free thinker, okay, guys? I'm trying to raise somebody with their own mind, who is not going to just conform and just be a yes man to anything that's being said and being taught in society. But Jess, no, this was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Honestly, it's been an honour. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really, really enjoyed the discussion. Guys, it's not too late in the comment section. You have 3 minutes. If there's anything you want to add, subtract, ask, you know, let me know in the comment section. Or if you enjoyed the discussion, just let me know. It would be great to know that you enjoyed the discussion. But guys, please do follow all our social media platforms, you know, on Breakthrough TV, the Hope Akedika Show. You know, the conversation carries on. I do try to be more engaging in the stories on the weekly basis. As things are breaking out or as something comes to my attention, the discussion tends to start, you know, there. And then eventually, if it's worth bringing here, then it tends to come here. So it would be great if you guys, you know, can get engaged and more involved, because this platform, like I said, it's not just for me, but it's for all of us. And, you know, Jess has actually been our first guest on the show. So
thank you.
You know, you know, I'm very, very proud of this accomplishment, and I'm very proud that it was with you.
Thank you.
And, you know, it's very, very funny how the world can just get people to meet, because we met in, you know, not the most ideal environment, but here we are today, both doing what we said we're going to be doing, both doing something that we love, and you know, it's upward and forward only from here. So thank you so much, guys, for joining me today on the Hope Akedika Show, and I hope to see you here next week.